I'm Eric Lyson.
And I'm Lara Mitra.
And this is How I Got Here,
A podcast that captures the twists and turns of professionals' careers and how they figured out what to do next.
We are two business school students at MIT Sloan and former consultants who are looking for inspiration on how to navigate our own careers. We hope that these conversations also help you figure out what it is you want to do and how you'll get there. Today's episode, we speak with Chris Bell, founder and CEO of Whele, about how his lifelong dream to become a CEO took him down a path of having multiple mini-careers. Chris worked as an engineer, a salesman, a consultant, and a head of supply chain, and tells us about how each of those experiences, a bit of self-reflection, and keeping his vision top of mind led him to where he is today. We hope you enjoy.
We'll be right back after the break.
Have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? When we were trying to get this podcast off the ground, we had a lot of questions. How do I record an episode? How do I get my show into all the apps people like to listen? Can we make enough to cover our snack budget? The answer to these questions is really simple. Anchor. Anchor is a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing your podcast. Best of all, it's 100% free and ridiculously easy to use. And now, Anchor can match you with great sponsors who want to advertise on your podcast. That means you can get paid to podcast right away. In fact, that's what I'm doing right now by reading this ad. Go to anchor.fm/start to join us.
Hi, I'm Chris Bell. I'm the founder and CEO of Whele. We are a CPG platform buying up micro brands on Amazon.
We wanted to start by learning a little bit about what you were like as a kid. So could you tell us a little bit about that? Were you studious? Did you ever get in trouble?
Wow, I was not expecting that question. So what was I like as a kid? So I didn't do any homework in high school. I didn't bring my books home. It was a goal of mine to never bring my backpack home or bring my books home. I tried to get all my homework done in the first 5 minutes of class so that I could go play sports and do things after school. That's a pretty common theme, actually. I only applied to colleges that sent me a brochure coming out of high school. So not very thoughtful about my career, to be honest, until probably much more recently.
When did that flip happen when you started being more thoughtful?
Probably during my first job. I was a computer engineer in undergrad. I loved that. I actually, I like to think I was a decently good programmer, but I also just loved it, kind of the intellectual challenge of it. And then I got an internship at GE Healthcare. I realized during that internship, I actually liked people better than the technical problems, like just the challenge of convincing people and understanding requirements. It was kind of a product management type role. And so kind of, again, without doing a lot of diligence, I just accepted a job. They gave me a job offer. I went. It seemed like a good job. And then about a year in, I realized that I didn't love it. Right? And I started thinking about what did I miss? Like if I had done more diligence, would I have understood why this wasn't a good fit for me? That kicked off probably the first round of really diving in and saying, what do I enjoy? What do I not enjoy? It made me realize I didn't love being at a company that was as big as GE. And I also realized I was on a CIO path, which is like infrastructure tech. And I didn't love being a CIO. I didn't love focusing mostly internally. I wanted to know how we made money. I wanted to know what actually was growing the business. And so that kind of kicked off a bit more introspection. And since then, I've been building on that over time.
Knowing what you don't want to do is really helpful. Did you have a sense for what you did want to do?
A little bit, but I still don't know what I want to do, I'll be honest. And so in general, I've always just tried to take the time to reflect, probably at least annually, of like, what do I love doing? Am I okay doing? And what do I not like doing? And am I continuing to kind of do more of the things I love doing and less of the things I don't like doing? I always do the 65 look back. And if you guys have heard of that. So essentially with every year when I do my thinking, one of the things I say is, what do I love? What do I love less? What do I hate? And am I headed towards something that's more things I love? But the other thing is I just try to project and say, when I'm on my front porch with my glass of lemonade in my rocking chair, 65 years old, telling my grandkids about my career, maybe they won't care, but whatever, I'll tell them anyway. We're like, am I gonna be excited to tell them about what I did? And am I gonna say like, yeah, I didn't always make money, I didn't always follow the conventional path, but like I had a cool ass career and I'm super excited to tell you about it.
Many of our listeners, like ourselves, are business school students, and we know after GE, you took a job in sales, and then you were in business school and got your MBA. Could you take us back to the Chris Bell of 2008, 2009, and let us know what was top of mind for you during that time? What were you thinking during business school?
Business school I loved it. I got an override every semester to take more classes than they allow. I studied from 6 a.m. to midnight, 5 or 6 days a week. It was one of the first times that I truly was like, I understand why this education is helpful to me and what I want from it, and I want to get as much as I can out of it. For example, I was in the class of people that they sent a workbook to before business school, and they were like, financial accounting, here's a 10-page workbook on like what a balance sheet is. And I was like flabbergasted. I did not know what a balance sheet was. I didn't know what an income statement was. I loved it. I just ate it up. I also enjoyed learning about all the career opportunities. I gained a bunch of weight because I went to every single info session and ate all the free pizza and stuff. But I just, learning about like what sales and trading people do, what investment bankers do, what consultants do, what a brand manager is, was awesome. It wasn't any exposure that I'd had previous to that.
You knew that before you came to business school that you didn't want to be a CIO. When you were in business school, what were you thinking that you wanted to be? I mean, obviously you ended up going to consulting for a little bit, but maybe before that, did you get a better sense of what you wanted to do?
During GE, I did a bunch of reflection on, if I don't want to be a CIO, what do I want to be? I want to be a CEO, right? If not a CIO, I said, I want to grow a company. I want to grow a team. I want to understand what it takes to be successful in the world of business, not just to make sure your servers have 99.9% uptime. And so I got the great advice at the time to go get some sales experience. So somebody cited this statistic that I'm not sure if it's real or not, but they said 70% of CEOs have sales experience. And that is one of the core functions of a CEO, selling investors, selling recruits, right? It is, in a lot of ways, a sales job. So I left GE, much to the chagrin of my relatives and family, because that felt like a very good, stable job. And I went to a company called the Gordon Flesch Company, which is a regional distributor of copiers, mostly printers, and like e-copy software, so document management software, which was really hard. I almost got fired a few months in because I wasn't selling anything. I took the intellectual approach to that, which was, they told me to do this pitch. So I walk in and I say, let me tell you why Canon copiers are better than Konica Minolta copiers. And people would nod and say they'd call me, and they never called me. And so it was a great experience just learning how to flip that, learning how to create some urgency, learning how to ask a lot more questions. Sales is often not about telling, it's more about asking. That was a great experience. Didn't want to sell copies for the rest of my life, but I came into business school still thinking I wanted to be a CEO. But I didn't know much more beyond that. The allure of consulting was it felt like the path that would continue the learning of business school. It was always intended to be a step on the way to building or running a company. I intended it to be a shorter step than it was. I thought about leaving after 2.5 years. And I almost did, actually. I actually had like the sit down with HR and ask them what transition looks like. And then a really good mentor of mine said, you're going to get promoted to manager, don't leave.
One of the things that we found interesting looking at your career, and you were just describing the transition from GE to sales and consulting, and you made other transitions later, is how you switched functions many points in time.
Yep.
Did you ever have a fear of, I have to start over again, or how am I going to learn this new skill when I was making progress towards a different one earlier, and how did you deal with that?
Yes, is the short answer. It's funny, when I left Bain and I went to Wayfair, I got a job at Wayfair designing, building, and running their supply chain. I'd actively avoided supply chain my entire Bain career. And so I actually tried to back out of the interview process several times during that because I was like, I don't think you have the right guy. I want to help customers. I don't really care about supply chain. And they were like, yeah, our supply chain helps the customers. It's going to drive repeat and loyalty and cost and things like that, which I think is true. But yeah, my first 6 months at Wayfair, I told my wife, lifestyle will be better. I won't be working as hard. It's a corporate job. And I was working way harder. And a big part of that was, probably all of it was self-driven. I worked till 2 a.m. most nights. I had this, at Bain, we used to call it the imposter syndrome, right? Like I had this big, these guys took a risk on me, they gave me this job, I need to show myself and show them that I'm worthy of the job.
So you talked a lot about imposter syndrome and coming into a new role, and I imagine when you've done, everything from doing kind of more technical work to then sales to then consulting, then operations, you have to kind of sell yourself that you can do this role. But how did you, when you think about those transitions, and then now when you're a CEO, how did you sell these other people to believe that you could actually do that role?
Yeah. So as counterintuitive as it might sound, both outwardly and inwardly, I generally try to be as honest as I can. For example, when I was interviewing for Bain, I told them, I think this is a really cool opportunity. I don't know what I'm doing. And also, I don't think I'm going to do that. I don't think I'm going to be here in 3 years. And lucky for me, they were like, that's super refreshing. Thank you. Please come and join us. When I was interviewing for Wayfair, like I said, I tried to back out of the interview process several times. I actually tried to not come in. And the recruiter was like, just meet James. He's the COO. He's great. Even if nothing happens, you'll be happy you met him. Halfway through my interview with James, he was saying things like 3PL, LTL. I was like, I got to stop you. I don't know what you're talking about. This is just not, I don't think this is the role for me. I know nothing about supply chains. And there were, a whole bunch of people that I used that approach with. And they were like, thanks for your honesty, not for us. Right? And that was probably best, because then I would have shown up and then the imposter syndrome would have been real. And they would have said, why don't you know what this is? Why don't you already have relationships with the biggest 3PLs in the country? And I would have been struggling to, I just would have been on my back foot, where when I showed up to Wayfair, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. You guys said you don't know what you're doing, and that's why you're willing to take this flyer on me, and let's figure it out together. And then actually, I also have tried to do that in actuality in these jobs. So when I joined Wayfair, I think one of the things that helped me be successful was I went to all the people who were now on my team who looked at me and said, this guy doesn't know anything about supply chain. And the first thing I said to them was, I don't know anything about supply chain, but I think you do. And so tell me, let's figure this out together. And I think you are going to help me a lot, and I hope that I can help you, and I think I can help you. And this is the skills I think I bring to the table, but I definitely don't bring supply chain expertise to the table. That's what you bring to the table. And I think they appreciated that. Right? And then same thing here. When I went through raising money for Whele, it was I just tried to be myself. Right. And there was a bunch of VCs who were like, yep, I get it, but not for us. Luckily, there were some who were like, you seem smart. You seem like you know what you're doing. Let's go. Let's do this.
When you think about pursuing your career ambitions, how do you make sure you have time for that and energy for that, but also have time to be a happy person outside of work and time for hobbies, family, and friends?
Great question. Something that I was not as great at early in my career, and I've been getting better at over time. Not that you guys need to rush out and have kids, but kids help. Once I had kids, I was like, they're only going to be this age once. A lot of it for me comes way back to time management and prioritizing what's important. And you start to realize when you really take a step back and you think about what's really important. Again, as my 65-year-old self, when I'm looking back, is it going to matter that I did that Excel sheet, or is it going to matter that I had dinner with my kids? Right? And having dinner with your kids every day, at least I think, is important.
It seems like even from early in your career, you've been thinking very long term. So you knew you wanted to be CEO, thinking decades in advance. You're reflecting on what your 65-year-old self might think of your career decisions. Whereas I think many of us get caught up on what's the next step and what's the next year or two look like. How would you suggest getting into that mindset of thinking long term?
Just do it. It's not that hard, right? I think the thing that people get caught up in is the specificity. And I have never been more specific with my long-term goal than I think I want to be a CEO. I think I want to build a company and lead a company. Like I said, I didn't know what industry it was going to be in. I didn't know if it was going to be a Fortune 100 company or a startup. I didn't care. I just felt like I was excited by the prospect of being the kind of single person responsible for the success of this company. So don't put a high bar on it.
And you talked a little bit earlier about there was this moment 2 or 3 years when you were at Bain that you were like, all right, I'm going to leave, talk to HR, decided to end up staying. And then a couple years later, did actually pull the trigger and move to Wayfair.
Yeah.
How do you know when it's actually the right time? And when you did the first Bain decision, was that the right decision, or should you have left then?
Bain is hard to leave, right? They're great people. They're smart people. They treat you well. It was tough. Like leaving, I took a meaningful pay cut. There's not a lot of jobs that offer you the cash comp that consulting does. I talked to a lot of people who had not just leaving Bain, but other places who make almost entirely comp-based decisions. And those people don't move as much and I think don't do as interesting things and end up just kind of getting golden handcuffs and stuck in one place for a very long time.
And so now you are actually in this role that you'd been thinking about since you were 22. Does it live up to the hype? What's it like being a CEO?
So I'm 5 months in, so keep that in mind as I describe what it's like. It is, in a bunch of ways, another day. In general, I do the same thing I did every day since business school. I wake up and I say, how can I spend my time today that will add the most value to the company and the people that I work with? I've been able, knock on wood, to date, to build something that I'm really excited about.
And now that you've achieved this goal that you've had for a while of being CEO, do you continue to do a long-term reflection about where you want to go in your career, or do you feel like you've arrived in some sense?
Well, I'm not independently wealthy living on my island, and so I don't know if I've arrived yet. But it's a really good question because I do think about that. It's one of those weird things where you're like, wow, I've been thinking about this forever, and I'm not 60, like I'm not even 40. So one, it's exciting that it's happened a little bit faster than I thought it would. Part of that was by taking a risk, right? It's not like I got promoted to CEO. I named myself CEO and then I went out and raised money and then started hiring a team. The path that I truly, truly hope is that this becomes a super exciting, continually growing company that becomes a big kind of pillar within Boston. And this is just what I do for the rest of my life. It's been a weird existential realization of like, wait, I might just do this for the rest of my life, which is fine. Like so far, it's been great.
You took a bit of a leap of faith by naming yourself CEO, starting your own company. Did you ever consider what would have happened if you had failed?
I was maybe a second-year consultant, so like 27-ish. And we did this crazy case for a client where effectively this company was entirely built on a single government contract. And they had successfully avoided that contract from being rebid for about 15 years. And they were making piles and piles of money on it. But basically it was going to be rebid, and it did not look good for them. And there was this client who was, I think, 45. And I remember sitting down with him, and I was like, so what are you going to do? And I, like, being 27, 45 seemed ancient, right? And I was like, oh my God, this guy has basically just ruined his whole career. And he said something like, well, I have another 20, 25-year career ahead of me. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, I'm only 45. He's like, I'm just going to quit, and I'm going to go start a new 20-year career right now. And I have 20 years. He's like, I'm just going to go start again. And I was just like, holy cow, you're right. It actually reminds me, there was this Saturday Night Live video called YOLO. So you know YOLO, you only live once. And most people use YOLO to say, do whatever you want, right? Live free. This video was funny because it was the opposite. It was saying you only live once, so make sure you wear your seatbelt and make sure you get a 30-year mortgage, right? And make sure you're basically like super safe because you only have one life. And it was pretty interesting, but it was basically the opposite of that, right? Like there's a world where you can be so focused on conservativeness because you're like every 6 months matters. If I don't get the early manager promotion, I'm going to be, my career is going to be ruined. But actually when you step way back, you realize that you can mess up a lot in your career. And if you're smart and if you work hard, you can still get to something that's really, really interesting. This is big, broad brushstrokes, and 6-month increments don't really matter a lot when you're 65 looking back on your life.
You can find more episodes of How I Got Here wherever you listen to podcasts. If you like this episode, please consider sharing. It really helps. Do you know the perfect person for us to interview next? Or do you want to be on the podcast yourself? Check out our website at howigotherepodcast.com. We'll be back with more episodes soon.